Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in the Gospel of Mark and in the doctrine of noesis. We're going to take a look at chapter 15, verses 6 through 15, and we're going to talk about the choice that the crowd was given from Pontius Pilate of accepting either Barabbas, setting free Barabbas, or accepting and setting free Christ. And we're always faced with decisions like that. Barabbas represented the current concerns about being a revolutionary and overthrowing the Roman military. Christ represented a kingdom not of this world, an invisible spiritual kingdom. Would they prefer the secular or would they prefer the spiritual? And it's the same thing that we face today. When we select our associations, our relationships, the life we will live, do we choose that which is secular and this worldly and serves the self? Or do we choose and select a spiritual reality that isn't always immediately visible, but sometimes requires a little bit of work? But we face the same choices today, whether we choose the secular here and now or the spiritual reality and the spiritual relationships. Let's go to block 1 and take a look at the text. Now, it was the custom of the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. "Do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" asked Pilate, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. "What shall I do then with the one you call the King of the Jews?" Pilate asked. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Why, what crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted louder and louder, "Crucify him." Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. Then he had Jesus flogged and handed over to be crucified. And by the way, being flogged many times resulted in death from flogging because it ripped the flesh from the spine, and very frequently people died from this flogging by the military. And Jesus was flogged and then handed over to be crucified. Let's move on and take a look at the commentary on block 2. Okay, let's take a look at Ruckman. Barabbas was a notable prisoner, Matthew 27, and he was someone who met the needs of this secular time, chronos time. In Greek, that is chronos time, meaning chronological time, that applies to the secular world, this worldly. The crowd picked a murderer over a righteous man. That comes from Acts 3:14. "You denied the Holy One and the Just One, and you desired a murderer." The Sanhedrin were jealous of the crowd that Jesus was drawing. They were jealous because Christ's time had come. And it's a different kind of time. It's kairos time, Kairos. That is in Greek divinely appointed time. It differs from chronological time. Chronological time is secular time. Kairos time is a divinely appointed time, and this was the divinely appointed time when Christ would be revealed as the Messiah who was the suffering servant, the Paschal Lamb. Barabbas, he stands in the place of all those who have been victims of the fall, all of those who have a fallen nature. Now, Edwards, Barabbas in Hebrew means son of the Father. The use by Mark of legomenos, translated called as, differentiates this son Barabbas from the true son Christ. Mark is drawing a very clear distinction between the false Messiah, Barabbas, and the true Messiah, the true Son of God, Jesus of Nazareth, the incarnate Christ. Christ is the Son of God's kairos appointed time. This narrative of setting Barabbas free while at the same time crucifying Christ, it's a sign of the atonement. This is a picture of the atonement. It's a sign. We can take this narrative as a sign of the atonement. The sinful, fallen Barabbas is set free, but only because Christ is designated to be crucified. So it is a picture of sacrificial atonement. This narrative is a picture of sacrificial atonement. Now, we know that the crowd was given a choice between Barabbas, a revolutionary Messiah, a insurrectionist who would murder if necessary to overthrow Rome, to get a group of revolutionaries together, and a very this-worldly type of messianic figure. Christ says, my kingdom is not of this world. His kingdom is beyond and above the secular world. And he offers something not visible to the usual vision, but it's a kingdom that is visible to those who attain unto spiritual consciousness and spiritual noesis. And the people choose Barabbas. They want this worldly results. They want this worldly attention to a this worldly self, and they don't even want to think about the kingdom to come, the eternal kingdom, the kingdom that is represented through spiritual consciousness, through the doctrine of noesis. So there's two different kinds of messiahs and two different kinds of time being talked about here. I went to an author by the name of McTaggart, and in 1922 he was published by Cambridge University Press, and he had his PhD dissertation published by Cambridge University Press. And his PhD dissertation was on Hegel, and within that dissertation, I looked through it because PhD dissertations have very, very detailed outlines. Rather than a table of contents, you have to provide a very detailed outline of the dissertation. And I found a section on time in it. And so in Block 2, Note 3, we're going to look at 4 aspects of time. How do we think of time within this doctrine of spiritual consciousness that Christ is teaching to the disciples? In the second half of the Gospel of Mark, it's all about a doctrine of noesis. Now we're going to look at time within that. Events in time, in other words, within our history, they are examples of when spiritual consciousness becomes concrete and visible. The ideas of the kingdom become revealed in our historical process of time. In this way, the eternal Logos works through and lifts up the historical process of time. And in this way, we know that the Spirit of the divine eternal reason, it is the genuine real. That spiritual reality is the genuine reality. Therefore, 3e, the idea of the true, all capitals, which for Hegel is, we've discussed it before, it's the speculative Good Friday. That is the idea that shapes everything in his worldview. The speculative Good Friday, which means what? It means that we view the Good Friday crucifixion always through the reality of the resurrection. Jesus is the resurrected, crucified Christ. And every negativity in the cross is overcome and negated by the resurrection. So the speculative Good Friday stands for negation of the negative. Every negative on the cross, sin is overcome, death is overcome, abandonment by God is overcome. All negativity in the cross has been overcome by the resurrection of Christ. And that, for Hegel, he terms the speculative Good Friday. So that's the idea of the true for Hegel. The speculative Good Friday is the idea of the true for Hegel. That all negativity in the cross has been overcome, forever, eternally overcome by the resurrection. The resurrection has overcome sin. The resurrection has overcome death. The resurrection has overcome being forsaken by God. All negativity in the cross has been overcome by the resurrection. So that's the final point that McTaggart wants to make. Let's go on to block 3 and take a look at verses 7 and 11. And the one called Barabbas, the one spoken of as Barabbas, who had actually brought about murder. He was a murderer. The crowd was stirred up so that they might ask for Barabbas to be released to them. So the religious leaders actually stir up the crowd to ask for a murderer instead of the true Messiah. It's members of the Sanhedrin who actually stir up the crowd and try to influence the crowd to reject Jesus the Messiah. And it says in the text, it's because they're jealous. They're jealous of the crowd that he draws because this is his appointed time. This is the appointed time. You know, Christ says, now my time has come. This is his time. And at the cross, there will be the 3 hours of darkness. The earth will tremble. The veil will be torn from top to bottom. And the centurion will declare, surely this man is the Son of God. True messianic identity will be revealed in the cross. Because the cross is a miraculous triune event. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are all involved in the reality of the cross, and it is a miraculous event in itself. To witness the crucifixion, just the crucifixion caused the centurion to confess Jesus as the Son of God. That's going to wrap up this lesson on 15:6 through 15. And next lesson we will go 15:16 through 23. 15:16 through 23. Next time, that wraps up the lesson on Barabbas or Christ.